First, I was asked to tell you a little bit about myself. So I will tell you that my name is Mary Finch, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Ingham County Women's Commission. And I've been serving on the commission since 2001. And one of the reasons I chose to serve on the commission was because I was kind of new to the Lansing area. I moved here after spending 17 years in Alaska, and I had a large network of things that I did there, programs that I spent time helping, and different things. I was on several committees. I had a life. And we chose to move here, which was not a bad decision. However, a lot of my networks were gone, and a lot of the things that I love to do, such as working in different programs, were not available to me. So I decided that if I went out and looked for a committee that I could serve on, that would give me the network, that would give me those opportunities to get involved in my community. And that's just what it has done for me. Now some days my husband asks me where I live, but most of the time I enjoy doing all the different things in the community. I'm going to just thank you for having me in tonight. And as we stand in the home of one of the pioneers in Lansing, the Mary Ann Monroe Turner home, it's appropriate that we talk about the women in Ingham County and their needs and issues. Mary Ann Turner was active in her church and community, and according to one document that I read recently, she was also active in the temperance movement. All of these things make sense to me because we know that she was a strong woman who lived to be in her 90s, and she served her community until the end. We know that she faced tragedy, and she kept on serving her community despite her husband dying on her and her 7 of her 10 children passing early in their adolescence and as young adults. So we know that some of the things that we're facing today as women in our community, she was facing even then. So I appreciate you inviting me into her home to speak, and I want to talk about the Ingham County Women's Commission. But before I tell you about the projects that we're working on in 2004, let me share with you some of our history. We've been blessed with having many notable women on the commission in the last 30 years. And we presently have 6 individuals on the commission. Our current chairperson is Becky Brimley from Mason. And Miss Brimley couldn't be here tonight. She's out of town with her family, and she sends her regrets. But also serving on the committee is Brenda Wellwood from Williamston. And Brenda's helping us with our website. And Doris Carlisle from Lansing, who's heading up our Celebrate Women's campaign for Women's History Month, which we all know is in March. In addition, we have Albert LeBlanc from Williamston, who's helping with the 8th grade girls essay contest. And then there's Angela Bowler and myself to complete the current roster of members. In the past, we've had women on the commission that are now active in local, state, or national politics. For instance, the Member of Congress, Debbie Stabenow, and Ingham County Commissioner Mary Stidd were both prior Ingham County Women's Commission members. We have a tape from Ms. Stabenow, who could not be with us tonight, but wanted to share her memories of how the commission was established and what they did in those first years.
Thank you, Mary. And I want to thank you personally for your work on the commission and for all of the wonderful work of the current Ingham County Women's Commission. It's hard for me to believe that it's been 30 years this August since I was involved in founding the Ingham County Women's Commission. At the time, I was out of college with my undergraduate degree and working on a master's degree, but also working with the Lansing Public Schools. And I had a wonderful opportunity to be involved with a dynamic group of women through the Ingham County Democratic Women's Caucus. And we were working with other women's groups of all parties and all affiliations and talking about how it was important to have women's voices represented in the policies of Ingham County government. Now, at that time, there were very few women on the board. There were very few women in the state legislature, or certainly we didn't have women in the United States Senate or the Congress to any degree, and we didn't have a woman governor, which I'm so proud that we have today. So back in the 70s, in 1974, this was a time when we were really asking a lot of questions about how we have our voices heard and how we were able to bring to the attention of Ingham County the impact of their decisions on women and their families. So this took a lot of work to put this together. A lot of wonderful people were involved, but we started building a coalition of all of the service organizations, women's religious organizations, women of both parties, women in business. We had a very large coalition that we began to form so that we could go to the county and make a very strong case. Because as you can imagine, at that time, this was 1973, 1974, it wasn't as clear-cut that women ought to be not only having their voices heard, but actually ought to be in elected positions. This was something that was new, although it's hard to believe today. It's hard for me to think of that, but 30 years ago, we were really having to make the case. This took a tremendous amount of work to be able to convince a majority of the Ingham County Board of Commissioners that they should pass this creation of an Ingham County Women's Commission. Once we were able to do that, and it was nip and tuck. I remember very closely counting the votes and having a lot of times when the board met, when we would come in and we would bring information and testify and bring a lot of different people with us. But once we were able to do that, it was interesting to me because as we were moving along and the bill was moving along, the resolution actually in the county, I decided at that same time to run for the Ingham County Board of Commissioners. It became clear to me, as well as the other women that we were working with, that we not only needed to have a commission to address the wide variety of issues that impact women, but that we also needed to have women on the county board and make sure that our voices were there for the voting. And I wanted to be one of the people casting the votes. And so during this process, I decided to run for the commission. I had not done that before. I had not actually ever thought about doing that before or thought about being involved in politics. But for me, this was an important time of connecting the dots about what was important for me and my family and the community, and how those in government were making decisions affecting my life and my family's life and the life of my community, and how it was important that we pay attention and that we be involved. So I ran, and after a lot of hard work and just a tremendous amount of effort and a lot of uphill struggles, really, as a young woman. I was 24 years old, and certainly, I think, taken, certainly discounted by my opponent for a long time until the very end. But I was successful because of a lot of hard work and wonderful support from people. So I ended up, in addition to working and being an advocate for the commission, I ended up actually being on the board when the first commission took effect, and I had the opportunity of being the original chair in order to help it get started. So what does this mean? Why has this been important? Well, one of the issues that we looked at was violence against women, both from a sexual assault standpoint and domestic violence. One of the first things that we asked about were the numbers. What was happening? Let's look at the statistics from the police department, the sheriff's department. How many incidences of domestic violence are occurring in our county? And we found, much to our shock, that those statistics weren't even kept at the time. And so that was a very big clue to us that we had a lot of work to do to even bring this to the forefront as a serious issue, to address that there ought to be statistics being kept, and that we ought to be doing everything possible to make sure that the law protected women and children in domestic violence situations. We worked very hard, the commission, and with a number of other organizations, including a group at the time called Sisters for Human Equality. We set up a council against domestic violence, a council for the prevention of domestic violence, which led to the development of CADA, our Council Against Domestic Violence that we have today, and the shelter that we have today. I'm very proud of the Women's Commission, because the Women's Commission's work, coupled at that time with myself as at that point in 1977 I chaired the Ingham County Board of Commissioners, along with a lot of other people, our prosecutor at the time, Peter Houck, our sheriff. Many people came together to work very hard to establish the first shelter for women and children involved in domestic violence. And we were one of the two first shelters, in fact, in Michigan. The other one was in Ann Arbor. We were in Lansing. But it was very, very clear that there needed to be a safe harbor, a place for women to go when, in fact, their life was threatened or there was violence occurring in their home to them and their children. So I'm proud that Ingham County Women's Commission led the way in developing our shelter and the important services that now occur, as well as the fact that the Commission has focused on other critical areas. Now, every issue is a women's issue. No question about it. We pay taxes, we breathe the air, we drive on the roads, we use the criminal justice system. But there are some issues that impact us differently, which is why it's important to have the Women's Commission, and why it's important to be able to address issues of child care, issues of sexual violence, domestic violence, and also issues like women in business. The largest number of new small businesses are being opened by women. So women in the economy, women as small business owners as well as employees. We have a lot of issues and a lot of focus yet to bring to issues that impact women differently. I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to play a role, along with many other people, in creating the Ingham County Women's Commission. And I'm very proud in this 30th anniversary year to say thank you to everyone who's been involved. Congratulations, and please keep up the good work, because we need your voice.
That was very nice of Ms. Stabenow to provide us that tape. It gives us an idea of what was going on in Ingham County in the 30 years ago, in 1974, 75, 77, when the commission was coming into being and forming. So in its charge, when it was set up, it was charged with being a county-wide clearinghouse and a resource center for the 132,505, and it was very exact, by the way, how many women there were in the county. So this group of women that Debbie was talking about had done a lot of study and found out who was the population they were serving. And I find it interesting that in the 2000 census, which I went and looked at, there were 144,408 women in Ingham County. Now that's not a large increase in population. However, I also went and looked at what the total population increase was in Ingham, and the women were the majority of the increase, which the growth in Ingham County has been due to women moving into the county. And I thought that was interesting. And then I thought about, in the last 30 years, what has happened that might have influenced that. And the things I came up with was MSU, of course, being here, and that count being in our census count, and government positions, which lend themselves well in the 70s and 80s and 90s to women taking those positions and running in those positions and working. So I thought maybe that those were two of the things that affected that move into the county by women, or at least a partial explanation of it. But when we look back through the years of the Women's Commission members and look at who has served on the boards, and that they wrote resolutions, as she talked about, helped establish the sexual harassment prevention policies for the county. They addressed areas of interest to women, many of which Ms. Stabenow mentioned in her film. We see that one of the main issues in the forefront of the 70s was domestic violence. And in the 80s, we helped women understand divorce and custody issues, and we aided homes to help the assault victims. And in the 90s, they were addressing pornography and sexual assault and breast cancer and early childhood education and positions for women. In the new millennium, our issues continue to be sexual assault and domestic violence and jobs for women and helping young girls. I know it appears that our issues are the same, so it would seem that we have not made any progress, but I would challenge that viewpoint. And I would say that we've come a long way in how we address the issues. We have the women of the past to thank for our freedom to sit and speak and discuss the issues among ourselves. We have open public forums, we have internet chats, we have commercials and educational spots on TV and radio, none of which they had back in the early 70s when they were talking in small groups in homes and meeting in small groups in homes versus being out in the open and the public. Today we see wonderful programs such as the Ingham Regional Medical Center's Conversations for Women. This program addresses women's issues such as cancer and heart disease for women, and they give women an opportunity to be heard and to join together on issues that are important to them. It's these types of programs that have opened up the conversations for women and helped us become more open and have our say, as you would say, in what's going on in our community, in our county. I want to talk of just a couple of minutes about things the Commission is currently working on. I would be remiss if I did not speak about the Michigan Women's Historical Center and Hall of Fame. After all, it's Women's History Month, and this is a wonderful place that should be commended for all it's done in the past and will continue to do for the future to address the fact that women have been consistently written out of the history of America. We are supporters of the center, and we try to participate in their events and on their committees. In fact, just this month we start meeting to plan the traditional picnic on the lawn that will be held in June, which is a large money fundraiser for the center. In addition, in celebration of Women's History Month, we have a resolution that we asked the Ingham County Commissioners to sign and pass. And I did bring it with us, and feel free to take a look at it later. But mainly what we asked them to talk about was how did Women's History Month come to be? And in the 70s, we started out with, which Debbie talked a little bit about, the general public's consciousness, and that the K through 12 curriculum was not including women, And we started out with a program for International Women's Day, which is in August, and the first Ingham County Women's Commission was very active in celebrating that day, and as it was celebrated across the world, the first one. And Debbie and the group were very active in that. And we talk a little bit about those things, and it also recognizes the commission on its 30th year. Another thing that we're working on is we want to encourage young people to remember that the part women have played in women's history. The commission has chosen this month to finance 4 displays, one at the Capital Area District Library at the main library downtown in Lansing, one at the Ingham County Human Resources Building on South Cedar, and 2 at area schools. Doris, which I mentioned before, is handling these for us. In addition, she's reading to young people and has a group reading to young people stories about notable women in our schools and the achievement of these women. Also, I mentioned before that Al is working on a committee for the Ingham County 8th grade girls essay contest. Now, this contest is sponsored by many organizations in our community. The American Association of University Women, the Capital Area District Library, the League of Women Voters, the Lansing School District, the Young Women's Christian Association, and of course the Ingham County Women's Commission. This contest is open to all 8th grade girls in Ingham County, and it asks them to project themselves into the future and describe what it is they want to do and what it took to get there. So it requires them to do a little research and look at what am I going to be, how did I get here, and most importantly, who influenced me on my trip here. In other words, it has to be 2 people, whether living or dead, that influenced them on what they chose to be. And it also asks them to tell what advice they would give to young women in 8th grade about what they need to do to get where they are. So they kind of have to project themselves in the future and then talk back to their peer groups. So it's kind of an interesting essays to read, and you can learn more about the contest. It's open now at the Capital Area District Library home site, which of course is cadl.org. Now, I know that Brenda is working in conjunction with the Board of Commissioners office to get our website up and all its links up and running. As I was speaking before, this is one of the areas that I think the commission can serve the community well, and that's to have the links to all of the things that women in our county need to know. Where do you go to get the help you need? Where do you go to get help with childcare? Where do you go to get the health issues addressed? And so we'll have our links to all of the different groups that we work with, because as Debbie was pointing out in her film, as we work with issues, we don't work alone. The commission's 6 people. It's not out there doing all these things on their own. They are people that are working the issues, and we are working with them. So you can also find that on the Ingham.org website. So that will be up and running very, very soon. We are just starting to work on another domestic violence project. I wish I could tell you that domestic violence is at an end, but it is not. And we have not yet completed our plans for everything that we're going to be working on. But we have several providers of services coming in from various homes and programs to brief us each month on what is needed in their program, how is their program working, what areas could we maybe help with. So we're looking at the needs of the women in the county in that area so we can see what we can do to help. One of the past projects of the commission was to make available a tape that is called First Years Last Forever. These were meant for daycare providers and others who have an interest in providing quality care for young children. We have copies of this tape still available. It was published in around 2000. It's still very current. And if you're interested in receiving a free copy of the tape, just let me know and I will make sure that one gets mailed out to you. You can see that we're very busy and that the commission continues to be active, and it's a challenge to provide the services to the women of Ingham County. Which brings me to one last thought for today. As we've said, the need of the commission is still strong. The issues women are facing are real and current. The commission is a volunteer group of dedicated women and men. But what we need from those of you who would be interested in applying to be on the Women's Commission is to call the Ingham County Board of Commissioners office at 517-676-7200. And I have brought copies of the application to be on the commission with me, and they're on the back table, so please help yourself and join us in serving. If you'd like to visit one of our meetings are held the second Wednesday of each month at 7 p.m. in Conference Room B of the Human Services Building, and that's at 5303 South Cedar Street in Lansing, and which means our next meeting is this coming Wednesday, March 10th, and you're more than welcome to join us. So in Marion Monroe Turner's great tradition of serving, I invite you to join us, and thank you for listening.